Thanks everyone for joining us.
Boy, I'm getting old.
Well, thank you so much, Scott, for joining us today. We're really excited to have you here, and welcome to Mirantics. Most of you probably know Scott as the co-founder of GitHub, which is probably a tool that I guess most of you use on a daily or weekly basis. Of course, I do, and I hope you all appreciate that. And Scott helped grow GitHub to be the largest code hosting platform out there, which was then eventually acquired by Microsoft. After that, he founded the company Chatterbug, which was a language learning service. And currently, he's building Git Butler, a next generation version control client, which I'm really excited to talk to you about. And perfect. As a starting question, just generally, what was your first touch point with the topic of computer science? How did you get into it? And when and where was it?
That is a great question. That's earlier than I think most of the interviews that I do. I'm curious, man, I'm so much older than you guys. Has anybody ever used a Texas Instrument calculator, like a TI-84? So I had a TI-81 because I'm that old. But in my math class, and we would program it. So I had a programming class, and it was in BASIC, and it was horrible, and I did really horrible because I didn't care. Like I didn't care about anything it was doing. But the TI-81 you could program, right? So I could make little games on it and stuff, and you could put in like this chord between other people, and like you could transfer my Tetris game or my whatever game to other people. And so I ended up making actually really dumb like Lemmings games, or like I did a Monopoly sort of game that you could actually roll dice and play and stuff. And it was so interesting to me because you could make it do whatever you want. And it was the first time that I kind of realized that I could have a vision for something and just be like what would be cool, and then do it, and then it's fun, right? And you could share it with people and they find it fun. And like the computer science course is never, I was just actually, I'm going for I have to get my permanent residency visa in Germany 2 days from now. And so they have to, have their print out all the stuff you have. And one of it is my college transcripts. And so I saw all the horrible grades that I got in college for computer science stuff. And it's so funny now being like, okay, like intro to computers is like a C. And I was like, well, this is not a good indicator for necessarily how it ends up. But yeah, so I think it was just about, it was the TI-81 that was my first thing that I really, really loved about making a computer do something you wanted it to do.
So as you said, also sharing what you did and what you built was I guess, already a big part of what you did in the early days. So maybe fast forward to GitHub, which is, of course, the code sharing platform, and Git, which is the collaboration tool that powered it. Fast forward to when you started GitHub. It was a really, really different time because Git itself was not, as we know it today, built for a large-scale collaboration across teams, but it was really started out as the Linux kernel version manager. Yeah. And what made you confident that Git would be the technology to build GitHub upon?
Oh, absolutely nothing. When we started GitHub, so actually I thought it was the dumbest possible thing to name a company, because there was a thing called like SVN dude or something, I think that was before that. And we're like, we're gonna have to change this. Like you can't build something with the name Git in it if this is gonna last for 5 years, and then we're gonna have to rename it to what, like, I don't know, Bitbucket Hub, right? Like I didn't know, like I thought it was really not a great idea at the time. And it's been fascinating to me that Git has been a standard now for such a long, now it's completely pervasive. Like it's not even close to what it was when it started, where it was one of many things, where it was like, even if it does well, it'll be 10, 20, 30% of the market. Now it is all 99% of the market, right? Like nobody's using Perforce. Nobody's using I'm trying to think of anything you would otherwise use, right? Like it's just not an option. Whereas at that time, there were 10 things that were perfectly reasonable. You start a job, it's like, okay, well, what are you guys using, right? So I actually, it was not, it's been fascinating to me that it's done so well for that. But we liked it. It was the beginning of the sort of distributed version control era. Nobody really knew what was going to win, right? Or if anything was going to win. People are using Mercurial, people are using Arch, Darks. Like there was a bunch of things that were sort of in the air at the time. But yeah, 15, 20 years late, like still now it's what everybody uses. It's the database standard for transferring, you know, bits, even not even version control, just like deploying or running CI or whatever, right? So yeah, I think we were mostly incredibly lucky that ended up, for whatever reason, winning. But I think it was actually a horrible idea to name it GitHub.
Yeah, I mean, as you already mentioned, GitHub won the kind of version control. I mean, of course, there's other services, Bitbucket, GitLab, whatever, but GitHub is definitely the most used and most appreciated. So I wanted to ask, because you wrote a blog post which was published on the Git Butler blog, in which you stated the reason why GitHub won. And you, in the TLDR, you mainly boiled it down to good timing and good taste. Could you maybe elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to figure out why something succeeds, right? Like, I think there's a lot of people here that are probably building startups, trying to figure out, is this going to make it? Is this going to blow up, right? Am I going to be able to find traction or product market fit or whatever? And the good part and the bad part is that it's not all up to you or your product, right? Like, some of it is this the right place at the right time, which you have to be lucky to a degree, right? There's great products that have hit at the wrong time. I think you can look back in history at lots of stuff, or we're too late, right? And then GitHub happened to be right at the right place, right at the right time, but also had really good taste, right? And I think good taste is something you can control. Like, you can't really control the timing. You can control the idea of, wouldn't this be awesome, right? Which I think it's a rarer question, and it's hard to answer well. And if you answer it well and you deliver something that is awesome, that is nice, that does reduce friction, right? Or does pave the cow path proverbially, or make something that is hard easy, right? In a way that's very delightful to people. That is one skill set. If you happen to do that at the right time, then it can be really big, right? And so you can control one, it's hard to control the other. My argument is that, I think in that blog post, was, I think we had good taste. I think we had taste that was unique in the market, right? Compared to SourceForge or Google Code, or like any of the other larger players that were incumbents at the time when we entered the please give your source code to us market, which is also a very hard thing to do, right? Because people really don't want to get, now there's like SOC 2 compliance and all this shit that you have to go through. But like at the time, I mean, I'm sure there was probably some standardization as well, but like we didn't go through it, and people didn't care because it was just such a nice experience that they were like, you know what, who cares, right? Like this is so much easier for what I want to do. Like, I really like this experience from beginning to end. All of the happy paths are very nice and very frictionless, and it makes my job easier and more enjoyable. But you know, alternative, you can start GitHub today. It probably won't do very well, right? For even if it has slightly better taste, whatever, because there's not, it's not the right time, right? Like it's a very different market today. And the question is, what is the next thing for, I mean, in that particular sphere, what is the next thing for version control? But at the time, it was a Wild West. Like, nobody knew. The Wild West is the best time to get into the market.
Exactly. And about timing and good taste, what technology, I mean, Git back then was more of an idea. As you said, it's very different from what it is today. And is there something technology-wise in that same space where you would say today it is underrated and it is kind of poised to become more important than it is today, in the same way that Git was maybe underrated back then?
I mean, this is going to sound like it's pandering, but I because we're at like an AI something talk, but I feel like AI is very much Wild West, right? Like, nobody knows. And there have been other Wild Wests that didn't work out, right? So I'm not saying like somebody will strike it rich in the same sort of way, or find the path or whatever, right? Like VR, or the, you know, crypto to a degree, which like sometimes it does well and something like whatever. But like, I think what's really interesting about AI right now is that nobody knows if it's going to be just completely world changing or the next VR, right? Like to a degree. Like I think there's clear value in it in a way that I never really saw in crypto the same way. I use it every day. It helps my process. It smooths, sort of paths that I have in trying to get something done. And so it has clear value to me. But nobody knows what it's going to be in 5 years or 10 years, right? In the way that I think was closer probably, if we wanted to have a comparable, to the version control world of 20 years ago, where although I guess the difference is that version control nobody's ever really cared about, right? Like it's always been kind of these larger companies that kind of give a shit a little bit, and that's kind of why it's a nice market, or was a nice market for GitHub, because nobody cared, right? Like nobody was like, you know what, we should make version control nice, because everybody's like, why would you ever do that? And so that's it's a little bit different, I suppose, but it is definitely. I think AI is more of a wild west of it can change lots of stuff and nobody really knows where it's going, honestly. Like it's just complete bullshit from everybody, right? And some of that bullshit might be true at some point, but nobody knows which bullshit is true.
Yeah, I think one of the major applications today that I guess as developers we all use on a daily basis is a lot of developer tools that use AI and incorporate them into their daily workflow. I mean, maybe a slight show of hands, who here uses Cursor? Okay, maybe also GitHub Copilot. All right, perfect. I mean, that's basic.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because now I'm throwing out a lot of comparables that probably aren't very helpful. But like, what's really interesting is that at the time that GitHub was coming up, we knew that Git was much nicer in lots of ways, and we knew the ways in which it wasn't, and ways in which it still probably isn't. In some cases, large repositories, things like that, right? Monorepos. But like we saw this thing of like, this is very nice. People might really like to do it this way rather than the way that they've been doing it for a long time. And so we can make that palatable, right? We can make that approachable. And so that's one thing. I think AI, the thing in AI is that I think most of us, if we're software developers and we've used it, we mostly know how it works. We mostly know what it's good at. We mostly know what it sucks at, right? Like we've done all these things. We have a pretty good idea of what its capabilities are and what it makes us better or worse at. What we don't know is what it's going to be able to do in 5 years or in 10 years. And that is actually a really, really big problem. Git has not changed fucking at all in 15 years, right? Like the Git that I started when I wrote the first version of the book that you read.
I did, yeah.
And 4 other people in the audience. But that's fine. When I first read the version of that, you can almost read that and still get everything out of it today, right? It just hasn't changed in 15 years. Whereas I think the main problem is that none of us have any idea what AI technology is going to be capable or not capable. Like maybe it barely moves, right? Like maybe there's a sort of an asymptote, or maybe it goes the opposite direction. Like is it exponential or is it a log function? Like nobody knows. Like raise your hand if you know. Actually, I'd like to talk to you. Nobody knows. Okay.
I mean, let's get into it. There's a lot of debate currently around that topic, right? Because model releases are kind of, actually, I don't know how deep you are into the whole AI world, just generally. But I mean, there's been a lot of debate in the last few months that models are kind of plateauing, that capabilities are plateauing. Just recently, I mean, with the release of OpenAI o3, there's a new kind of paradigm shift in the area. And do you see not just the kind of trend of utilizing a model in very different ways, but with the current model capabilities, what do you think there are some ways in which it's not yet fully functional for daily use cases? Or is it something that there are certain use cases that you are not really satisfied with at the moment? Or is it just that there is a whole bunch of stuff that we don't know about?
So I mean, I know what I like using it for, and I know how it's valuable to me now. And I think it comes back to, like, what it's not useful to me now, I think comes back to the original sort of premise, which was taste, right? Like, I think AI doesn't have taste, and so I always kind of feel like I mean, sorry, you guys all probably know a little bit more about AI stuff than I do. I'm in the wrong campus for this particular thing. That's not my specialty. But I think generally what it's really good at is being average at things, right? And so if you want to be better than average at stuff, then that's not your thing. If you want to have average for cheap, then that fills that hole very well, right? And so I don't want to spend time figuring out how to do things that somebody could be average at. Like if I write a Terraform file or whatever, like I can go from 0 to average very, very fast. And then it's like an 80-20 rule to become better than average at it, right? But I'm fine being average at that thing, right? I just don't want to spend that time on it. And so it's a superpower to become average at anything very quickly. But having taste in something, saying what would be delightful to use, I think is something that is impossible. It's very difficult to answer. You can hire lots of normal people, right? Like you can hire actual AGI, which is just human beings that you hire, and you get them to do stuff, and they still, a lot of people suck at things that you want done, right? So even if AI is amazing, it's still going to be bad at some stuff because normal people are bad at some stuff. So I I use it to become average very fast at things that I don't care about, and the things I care about, I want to be a little bit better than that, right? And so that's where I see it in my life right now. That's how I use it when I try to get it to design something for me, because I don't want to spend time to, from the designer that works for us or whatever. Like, it's always horrible. If it's I want to figure out how to loop through Rust in a way that I forgot how to do, it's much faster at doing that very quickly and better than I do. So I try to always figure out, what am I trying to do? Am I trying to do something average? I can do it immediately. If I'm trying to do something great, then I want to spend the time at something that I think can be better than average, right? Like that's where I see it.
Also connecting it to taste, and I guess taste in a way would be defined, or would you define as making also something people want, and making something that is useful to people, which in a way is what we're all trying to do when building products. Maybe could you just really quickly talk about what Git Butler is to everyone that's not yet familiar with it, and maybe also the aspect of the taste that goes into that, and knowing what to do and how to use it better.
Yeah, I mean, so Git Butler is a company that started because actually there's a Kirill, my co-founder's in the room here somewhere. Raise your hand, Kirill. Where's Kirill? No, he's not. Oh, he had a beer and dish. So he started a company that was a version control company, and I found this really interesting. Of like, if Git wasn't the thing that sort of ruled the world, like what would it look like? What is interesting version control, right? Let's look at things that do version control but that aren't programming tools. Like Google Docs does version control, but it's very, very different than how programmers do version control, right? Like, it's real time. There's no branching and merging. It's sort of streamed. Like, what are interesting? You never have to commit something in Google Docs, right? It's always kind of remembered, and you can get back to it. And so it does a lot of the same functions, but in a very different way. And so I like the idea of stepping back and being like, what are we really trying to do with this? What's first principles on this problem set? What would, if GitHub had designed a client, right? GitHub never designed a client, right? It was just the server. It's always been they have GitHub desktop, but it's like the play school version of Git, right? Like it doesn't do anything that Git doesn't do. It doesn't really make anything more powerful. It doesn't work with GitHub in some specific way. And so I wanted to know, what if GitHub had done vertical integration? Like, what if it was end to end? Like, what would be cool? Like, what could you do? Could you see? So we lost a lot of centralized version control aspects in the sort of 2000s, right? Where if you were using Perforce or something, and somebody was editing a file and you were editing the file, you would see that you'd have conflicts before. Essentially, now what happens is you both edit a file and then you both commit the file and you both open PRs and everything looks great, and one of you merges and the other one has 100% of the work, right? Like there's no collaboration there's no sort of centralized idea of what everybody else is doing. And so there's a lot of stuff like this, I think, in version control even, which people find very boring and I find really, really exciting still, even after 15, 20 years of doing this, is like, how do we work together? What are interesting patterns of how we interact and how we work on code, how we work on documents, and like there's all of this that just hasn't changed in such a long time. And so that was the idea of GitButler, was just to be like what would the most insane thing be? What would just running a daemon in the background and I'm writing code and it's committing for me and writing commit messages and pushing it and merging it with people's stuff, right? What would the most crazy thing be of just no friction at all to collaborating with people? So that's why we started it. We didn't really have a thing, this is exactly what we want to build. It was more, how do we make this problem space not what it was 15 years ago, which is what it is now, right? It's exactly this. It's essentially exactly the same collaboration problem that we had 15 years ago, and I think that that's silly.
Was there a specific signal or a specific kind of aspect which kind of signaled to you that it is the right time now to reinvent version control?
No, I think it was more the complete lack of movement in the space. There's just nobody. If you think about, if you have a project, a commercial project, open source, it doesn't really matter. If you have some source code, you want to put it somewhere, where do you put it, right? You either put it on GitHub, or you put it on a clone of GitHub. So you put it on GitLab because it's cheaper, or you put it on Bitbucket because you're crazy. But they're all the same. Like the merge requests, pull requests, it doesn't really fucking matter, right? They're all branch-based sort of units of unified diff commenting integration. It's all the same. And it's all exactly the same as when I helped launch it 15 years ago. There's no real impressive change. There's action. I mean, it's not like GitHub's not shipping stuff. They're shipping great stuff. It's just none of it is around collaboration. None of it's around code review. None of it's around, version control, right? It's GitHub Actions, it's Copilot, it's things that kind of help you build the code or make sure the code works or whatever. But it's not, do I work better with you, right? Can we get this thing done on a branch together better, right? It's exactly the same process. So that, if you're looking at a large space that's clearly both of these companies are billion-dollar public company, or sorry, GitHub's not, but GitHub is part of it had $2 billion in revenue last year, right? And GitLab had $1 billion or $750 million in revenue, as a clone of this other thing, right? So this market is huge, and nothing has changed in over a decade. So I find that interesting. That is clearly a thing where you can build something that has value, I think.
As you said, you target a pain or a pain point that's really hasn't or has been there for the last 15 years and that really didn't change. And what I'm interested in, is that something that you already try to look into in your GitHub days? Is that something that just, because you said the lack of change was the kind of motivator, but is that something that was also apparent back then?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I mean, I think part of my advantage in being able to do this is I remember conversations that we had at GitHub where we wanted to do this or wanted to do that and never was able to ship those things, right? For various reasons, for bureaucratic reasons or for company-wide, or, I mean, it's always, if you look at a large company, it's always easier to innovate as a small company, right? Because you just don't have, GitHub can't do a lot of stuff because I mean, obviously for better for them, they have hundreds of millions of clients, right? They can't, it's hard to change a rocket ship that's already mostly on its way to Mars. It's very, very difficult to do that. If you're just building the rocket ship from scratch, you can build the rocket ship differently, right? It may work, it may not work, but it's way, way easier to do a different design and see if it works, right? Whereas it's very hard to change that thing in flight. And that I remember having this conversation at GitHub when we were the underdogs and fucking SourceForge or Perforce or whatever was the big dog, and being like we can move faster than them, right? And so I feel like that is your advantage. there's one thing that is to be the first person in a Wild West. There's another thing, which is to see somebody who can't change, right? And come in and be like, here's the change you can't make. Let's see if that lands. Like, let's see if that's interesting.
And currently, I mean, you launched GitButler in February 23, if I'm correct, or around that time?
Maybe.
That's what it says on LinkedIn.
Yep.
I have my sources, but
you probably know better than me.
And this was, of course, a time when LLMs were pretty new, when they're taking off currently. How has this takeoff in this new technology and this branch affected your product decisions and your development decisions at GitButler?
It's interesting. So from an AI perspective, we have not used AI super strongly. I think we've used it for, again, things that we feel like we asked ourselves this at some point where we're like, if you hired a junior intern or something, like what would you have them do to take off your plate? And there's little things. There's little, because it's also very fast, right? And it's very cheap. And so one thing that like you start working, and once you have enough work, it figures out what the name of your branch is, because who gives a shit, right? And nobody wants to do it, and nobody wants to like have that block them and take the time. And so it's been very nice to just be like, here's the name of your branch. Like, rename it if you want, but like, here's a default one. Or you can hit a thing if you're gonna write WIP and commit and push it somewhere just to push it, you might as well hit a thing to have an LLM like give you a commit message, because it's gonna give something better than here's some bullshit, right? Like, which is like 50% of my commit messages. So, so there's things like that of like, I don't want to spend the time, so I'll have this backstop. But now there's other interesting things like merge conflict resolution, or give me 90% of the work and let me kind of fix it if it's wrong, or double check it and just say yes, it's fine. With code, it's, I think, really, really hard because it doesn't really know what you want, right? It's really, even if you have all the written information in the world that you give the LM, it's still very hard to know what you want it, like what you want it to be. It can write tests, it can do stuff where it can look at it and infer, but like what is it? What is this, product supposed to feel like or something? I think is super, super different. It's hard. It's hard if you have real human beings that hear you talk about something, read all the issues or whatever. They don't always know. Like, you don't always agree. So it's an incredibly high bar. So yeah, we have little things. So there's a lot of little things, and I think they're very for what we're using it for, which is, I think, also a high bar. I think they're more delightful experiences, right? Rather than fundamental. It's not here's the product is not AI. AI is kind of sprinkled on top in a way that is hopefully delightful if you want to use it, and out of your way if you don't want to use it. Which I kind of hate saying sprinkled on top, because everything is sprinkles shit on like AI on top of stuff I never ever use, like Notion or whatever. Like, I don't want you to summarize my bullshit, but like for this, I kind of do sometimes if I don't want to do that and I have to, right? Like I don't need to summarize my email all the time, so I don't really want Gemini in my Gmail to do that for me. But I do need to write a commit message in order to push it somewhere. And so if I don't want to do it, I'd rather just hit a button and have that, because it's better, right? So I think a lot of it is like, do you want this? Do you need this? Do you not care? Do you care? Like, is it going to do a good enough job for what your care level is? I don't know if that's an answer in any way, but that's kind of how we think about it.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer, actually, because what we see in AI currently is, for the last couple of years, is that there's a lot of demos for everything. There's a lot of showcases. There's AI integrated in all sorts of ways that is not really necessary, as you just said. Maybe the most recent example would be Apple Intelligence, which failed in some spectacular ways. But
yeah, it's awful, right?
Yeah,
Wait, does anybody work at Apple Intelligence? No, I'm just kidding. It's illegal here.
Yeah, sort of. And maybe one of the most consequential, and as we already saw from the audience, one of the most consequential uses of AI specifically for software engineers is sort of Copilot. And I'm, of course, specifically interested in your initial reaction and your kind of thoughts when GitHub Copilot came out.
Yeah, I mean, I was asked to be a very, very early beta tester by the CEO at the time, and I thought it was super cool, and I've used it fairly consistently since then. Part of it was, I mean, again, I think all of this really comes back to, do you want to be average very fast or not? Most of the stuff I use AI for is stuff I want to be average at very fast. So I use it for legal stuff a lot, right? Especially German legal shit. Like, I'll be like, what? Like, what's the rule for getting a Fiktionsbescheinigung or whatever? Like, if I need to leave the country when my visa expires, like, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Like, but it fucking knows, and it gives you sources, and you're like, yep, actually, 99% of the time it's right, right? Like, for stuff like that. The medical stuff, actually, I've like uploaded like medical results and been like, what's wrong with me? And it's like better than the doctor most of the time, because doctors don't give a shit. Like, they spend 5 minutes with you. Like, I get the same thing, right? Like, there's a lot of that stuff where it's like, if I don't want to go to school for 4 years to get like average at this, like, it's such an amazing superpower to have this. On the other hand, I am a relative computer science expert, right? Like, I'm a Ruby expert, so I'm not going to ask it a lot of Ruby questions. Like, I know how I want to do most of that stuff. But GitButler is written, it's a desktop client, so it's written in Tori, which is like this Electron alternative. So the backend is in Rust and the front end is in Svelte. And two things that I'm not good at are Rust and Svelte. So if I need to figure out how to do something, especially in Rust, like, do you know how long it's been since I knew what the fuck the difference between a stack and a heap was? Like, I haven't been to school in 20 years. Like, I don't do memory management anymore. I haven't written C code, and I don't care about pointer bullshit. And if I'm having sort of memory problems, right? So I don't care about that. But I want to write stuff in Rust. I want to write Git function. I know what I want to do in Git, and I know the binding, because I help develop the spec for libit 2, so I know how I want it to run, but I don't know necessarily how to write those things in Rust. So I'll use Copilot for that, right? I'll even sometimes I'll write it in Ruby and be like, give me this in Rust with the Git2 binding, right? And it does it most of the time, especially with that prompt. It's great, right? It's like, I know exactly what you're doing. I know, like, it's insanely good at that. And that would take me 3 hours to figure out how to do properly, right? And so again, it just really depends on who you are and what your expertise is, and how to translate that into sort of the average expertise of everybody else on the planet. And that's, I think, what most people don't get about why AI is awesome, right? They just try to do something and it fails, and they don't understand like what it's capable of, and what you should really be asking it to do. And if you guys are all writing AI things, that's the thing to know about your audience too, right? Like, they think it's fucking magical and can do anything, and they don't. Like, I think it's really nice to set expectations and be like, just ask it. I saw a thing about like college professors. Like, there's a lot of college professors that are like banning it or whatever, and I think banning it's stupid. But there's a college professor I read about that says, take the prompt and put it into an LLM and see what the essay that it comes up with is. That's the average. Do better than that, right? Like, that's a fucking fantastic way to use it, to be like, that this is the middle of the road. Like, be better than that. That's what you should be striving for. And I think it's a great way to use the tool.
Yeah, that's a really interesting approach, and I mean, a really good way to look at it. Concerning collaboration, because Git, Butler, as well as other version control systems, is fundamentally about collaboration. And if you were to say that, I mean, there's been a lot of conversation that 2025 is the year of agents, like last year. And what you would do basically if you were to hire or to kind of replace, as you said, junior developer or some intern with an AI system is collaborating with the average. What kind of opportunities and what kind of ways do you see for collaboration with autonomous AI agents, not only as a co-pilot, but also with the systems itself?
So I do, sorry, I may have, yes, it's average in, I think, the intelligence of what it can output, right? From writing or from producing code, actually code could be a little bit higher than average because it has lots of examples, right? It does much better code in some examples than I do because I didn't even know some of these syntaxes existed or whatever, even in Ruby. But on the other hand, what is really nice about it, and that everybody I think should keep in mind if you're writing something for it, is that it is always available and infinitely patient, right? And that is something to go back to the medical thing, like try getting like 3 hours of back and forth with a doctor, right? Like it's impossible. But the LLMs have read every medical report in the world, right? Like it's such a strange thing to be like, what is rare? Like what is hard to get expertise on, right? Or any individual is so specialized that they lose a lot of context, whereas LLMs are average, but average in a very high level way everywhere, right? And so there's some things that they're very good at and some things that are not. And I feel like it's important to understand kind of what that means for what you can do. And I've never had a German doctor be as nice as an LLM. Like it's very, very difficult to get somebody to give a shit about you, right? And to spend time whenever you want to and things like that. So it really, or even, I mean, even if something is dumb, like I was saying before, something as dumb as creating a branch name or something, right? Like it's just some time, right? It's just some care that you don't want to give. So it's like, just do this immediately and cheap and fast. And I care, like something cares about it. It's so interesting to me.
Yeah, I think all of us developers have faced the problem of naming functions appropriately, and actually the auto-generated commit messages are definitely one of my favorite Git Butler features. And yeah, but in general, about collaboration, the kind of, some say that the role of the human in the loop is getting more towards just QA, just assuring that the kind of agent is, or LLM is outputting stuff that actually makes sense and steering it into the right direction, which is a very, I'd say, different form of collaborating than we had before, where you had really, if you say a senior and a junior developer sitting together and working on a problem, it's a very different approach to working and collaborating.
I don't know. I feel like the thing that's hardest in building product is knowing what product to build. I think it is having that taste, right? Like I think to be really shitty about it, if you asked an LLM to build a code hosting solution, they probably would have built Google Code rather than GitHub at the time, right? Like this ticks all the boxes. This has all the features that we want. This makes, all of the sort of requirements sort of satisfied, but it's not satisfying somehow, right? Like it's not an interesting thing. It's not a beautiful thing to use. It's not fun. However you want to say it. I feel like there is still this room for taste of I mean, it's like I have a friend. Actually, I went to school with a guy that ended up being a semi-famous actor and really has a lot of angst. I feel like that's a German word. A lot of anxiety about the future of cinema, right? And I feel like cinema is similar. Like the AI will be able to make movies, right? Or be able to make whatever you want to see happen, but it won't have any taste in what is an interesting story, right? Like it's like pop music or something where you can feed it a formula and like a lot of people will like it, but like, is it truly great? Like, is it something that inspires people or drives people or something, right? And I feel like cinema is even more difficult to do than that. You can do a hero's journey thing with some prompt or whatever, but like, and give it whatever visuals, but like, what is a story that moves you, that's interesting, that makes you cry or makes you, connects with you on a human level? And I think that's still going to be very hard because you can get 1,000 screenwriters and there's 5 that can do a script that does that, right? Like it's still better than, like, it's still something that is different and magical and difficult to attain. And difficult to say. You can't train something, right? You can't say yes and no on these scripts or something, right? Like it's just very ephemeral. Sorry, I may be getting a little bit too philosophical here.
No, I really love the notion of taste and how to kind of think about that in this way. You also invest in companies, and you also, of course, look at a lot of different ideas. I guess you get approached quite a lot with people wanting to tell you about their latest, greatest products. Do you also judge that notion of taste in founders and in people doing some project?
That's a good question. So for one, before anybody approaches me, I don't invest anymore because I realize that, I mean, if you do anything for long enough, you realize what you want to spend time on and what you don't want to spend time on. And what I don't want to spend time on is German paperwork, which if you invest in a bunch of companies from Germany, you will have to do a lot. And what I don't want to spend time on is other people's companies, like that I'm not working at day to day, right? So I want to then do so. And we didn't really have a flat. It was just dumb. I was investing in companies that of people that I just liked, right? Like that, not necessarily because I thought they had a good idea, but because I thought they had the right approach to the problem set. And you know, I still have probably another decade before I figure out whether that worked or not from an investment thesis. But I'm a horrible investor, and I realized that pretty early. Maybe I said to you or somebody else, I'm an LP in lots of other funds, and they'll send me reports with numbers in it that I don't know what they mean. And I'm like, I'm also an investor. I should probably know what that particular index is. Like, I don't know what you're calculating here. What is 0.38? Is that good or is that horrible? Like, who knows? So yeah, I stopped investing because I realized I don't care. Like, I think actually what happens with a lot of people here, there's a bunch of founders, a bunch of people building shit. There's a handful of you that'll do really well and make lots and lots of money. A bunch of you won't. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But if you do, I think what'll happen is that you'll be like, I think a lot of people are like, okay, what's my next step, right? Like, and investing seems like the next step, and it's, you know, invest if you want to invest, or be part of an investment company if you want to, but like don't make it and then be like, now I'm going to be a good investor, because you don't fucking know. Like, you know your company, right? Like I knew my company, and it was a weird outlier anyways. And I've had to learn a lot of stuff since then, but like it's not good on, I don't even know if anybody's good on saying this is going to work and this is not going to work. Like nobody knows, right? Like it's just a complete crapshoot. So so you have to love it, right? Because it's what you want to do every day, and it wasn't what I want to do every day, and so I don't really do it anymore. I'm an operator. Like I'll be 80 years old and sitting up here and in front of, you know, much younger or same age, but like none of you guys will be here anymore. And I'll still be here giving talks and doing startups and stuff because it's what I love doing, right? Like you have to just recognize what it is that you love spending every day on and do that thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of us builders and a lot of us founders are exactly working towards that goal of building something that a lot of people use, a lot of people love. And I guess most of us also aim at it being acquired someday. And I would like to just spend one or two questions on your time after GitHub was acquired.
Yeah.
And how that...
Sorry, can I interrupt? Can somebody get me another beer? Thank you, sir.
No, I wanted to talk about your time after GitHub was acquired and how that also, I mean, affected you personally, what that feeling was like, because it was, of course, at the time, a really big acquisition and, of course, I guess, life-changing event. So I'd like for all of us to maybe get a glimpse of what you personally went through in that time.
Can I ask if this is being recorded? Thank you.
It is.
Oh, boy.
Don't worry, nobody's going to see it.
I mean, what kind of answer do you want? What kind of answer you guys want? You want an honest answer?
Of course.
So the honest answer, I think, is that it is a whatever age you are when, if you hit it really, really big, is going to be the age you are when you have your midlife crisis. It doesn't matter what age you are. So, and I say that after having kind of avoided that term for a while, but I think it's an interesting inflection point if it happens to you, which it doesn't happen to a lot of people. So, you're very lucky if it happens to you, right? And it's stupid to think that it's a burden or it's anything other than awesome. It is awesome. The thing is that if you get fuck you money, then you can do whatever you want, and doing whatever you want is difficult if you haven't been doing whatever you wanted your whole life, right? So it can lead to unhappiness in a relationship. It can lead to serious unhappiness in your life if that's not kind of the life you want. It can lead to there were probably 50 people in GitHub that I know that became multimillionaires, right? And so it's very interesting to see what everybody does, like after the fact, like 5 years after the fact. One of my co-founders is a professional race car driver. One of my co-founders is a serial investor, and philanthropist. I'm doing the same shit I was doing then. Turns out I really like that part of my life. Another is making indie, video games. Like it's just everybody goes in a different. It really exposes who you are in a very interesting way. And I think you can ask yourself now, right? Like if I got $100 million tomorrow, like what would I give a shit about? Because the sort of shitty answer is that I don't need to be doing a startup, right? Like it's actually almost, if any of my coworkers in the audience, I apologize, but I've almost no incentive to sell this company, right? Because I don't need money. Like it's not interesting anymore. Like it's nothing I want to do that I can't really do. Like yachts aren't interesting, the jumbo jets aren't like there's stuff that I can't afford, but like none of it is interesting. What's interesting is everything that I do with my life. Like I love like it's very it's not a high bar to be able to do whatever the fuck you want, right? Like most of you could be doing it now. And if I look at what my life was like before this happened and today, it's not massively different, right? Like my daughter comes up to my room and wakes us up, and I fucking make muesli for her and get her ready for school and change her diaper, whatever. Like that is my life before. That's my life now. It makes me happy. I go to work and I hustle at a startup and try to make it work and I get excited when I'm on fucking Hacker News. Like, it's the same shit, right? Like it's the same thrill. It's the same thing that is fun. If you're honest with yourself. If you're not and you want to fucking race cars, right? Then that's what you're gonna go do. But like, it's an interesting question to ask yourself, right? Like, if this happened, is this what I'd be doing? And I'm not saying it's not the right thing to do if that's not the answer. It could be, I'm gonna do this and then it's, hookers and blow on the yacht. But like, that's fine. But like that's you need to know what makes you happy, right? And what makes you happy you could have now. It's very difficult to say that changes at some point.
It's the love for the game, in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it's just recognizing what it is, how you like spending your day. I mean, it's probably the same for a lot of people that got into computers or whatever, right? Like you like solving puzzles or something. There's nothing more fun than just having a puzzle and solving the puzzle. Like I still need to set up a structure in which I can write code once a week because I'm not happy when I'm not, right? If I'm writing PR shit and stuff for the investors and doing CEO stuff and trying to raise funds and stuff like that, it's kind of fun, but like it's not nearly as satisfying to me as fixing a bug in the fastly caching bullshit or whatever it is that I did this week. Like I like it's intensely, interestingly satisfying, and that's my personality, right? Like it really, you have to know what is your end game? Why do you want to sell the company to Microsoft?
I think that's a great point, and thanks for your insights. I think this is a great place to kind of get into the QA now. So Leo is going to go around with the microphone now, and please raise your hands if you have a question.
Hi, thanks for being here, first of all. As you said, AI and LLMs currently are these sort of mediocrity machines, right? And to me, this is mostly because of softmax activation and autoregressively applying like the cross-entropy loss function, actually. So do you think ever we can build this sort of taste, which I think is sort of a human feature, of, at least for now, into AI, and how should we do that?
I mean, well, I just want to go on record. I wouldn't say it's a mediocrity machine. I think, I think, I know. You're right. You're right. You're right. But in a yeah, okay. I suppose it depends on where the sort of curve is. But there's also things that you don't. There's no getting better than mediocrity. Right? I don't need to get better at. In fact, sometimes it's worse to get better at looping through an array in Rust. Right? I just want to be able to do it. I don't need to be able to do it clever. But that aside, wait, what was the second part?
Basically, my question is, wouldn't you love to have an AI that's actually excellent at the things you love doing, right?
So that's the thing. Like, I feel like it's so hard. I've worked with enough human beings in my life to know that it's very, very difficult. Everybody is different, right? It's almost, it would be, I can't even imagine being able to train a system to say, this is what I really like, right? It's almost like this, I know it when I see it thing, and you mesh with a person and you work well together somehow. And it's very human and difficult to, there's emotions and there's hormones and there's shit that happens and there's ways that there's micro expressions and stuff, right? Like it's just so hard. I've never really loved working with somebody that I've never met in person, I think, right? And AI is kind of by definition is the person you've never met in person that's relatively good at their job. And so like I find it very difficult to get excited by this person has this taste that's very specific. Like there's even people that I work very well with that I disagree on their taste, and we work it out together and come out with some better idea, whatever, right? And like an LLM's not going to argue with you, right? And be like, you're full of shit. That's stupid. That's not what I experienced, right? Like, how about this other thing? Like that is what's interesting, I think. And so for roles in your life that you don't want that, then man, I really don't. I'm not shitting on AI, right? Like, I think AI is fucking unbelievable in so many areas. Like, I use it so much. I sell it to everyone I know, but in very specific ways, right? And then there are other ways. There are other roles in my life that I really love that I can't imagine somebody that's not human taking up, not because I don't think there's a capability of it faking it or whatever, but because they don't get mad when they've had too much to drink or whatever, right? Like, I don't know, whatever, like just some quirk, right? Some part of personality that makes the human experience interesting. But or context. Actually, that's maybe a better thing, is that I love arguing with people. And it's no fun to argue with a 20-year-old because they've done nothing, right? There's no, sorry for everybody who's 20. I'm so sorry, I forgot my audience. With a 14-year-old. They've done nothing. I mean, it's Germany. They've probably still, fucking drank and shit. But like, when it's fun to argue with people that have experience, and they have different experience than you, right? And to be like, this is what I believe. This is what I believe. Let's come up with something. And so I do think that there's human aspects that are not replicable. Emotion and hormones and things like that being the easiest, but like experience and context and intuition being secondary. So yeah, anyways, this is a long answer to that question. I think it's interesting. I'm fascinated to see how these things kind of slot into the future of building stuff. But I think, like everything, any new technology that makes everybody much more efficient just lets people do more shit, right? Like, I don't think it's they're going to take all our jobs or something like that. Yep.
More questions?
So thanks for the really nice talk. I also wanted to thank you indirectly for, I mean, you created something that actually sent out ripples into the future. And we know that LLMs can reason better because they had access to GitHub. I mean, it's a proven fact. I mean, there's
We
papers
can
that
get
show
in, actually, sorry, before
Yeah,
you get to your
yeah,
question,
yeah.
I'm fucking, one of the most fascinating things is people getting really mad about LMs being trained on like the differences of licenses of source code on GitHub. And my thing is that it's very interesting. I'm actually really kind of, I don't know how to pull the audience here, but like my thing is I've always open source stuff because I want other people to learn from it, right? Like I don't, it's not protective. Like I don't care. I've never GPL'd anything in my life. Like I just don't care. I want you guys to read it, learn from it if you can, build something like it. It's fine. I've been very permissive with everything. And everybody I've known and worked with professionally is like that. But there are people that are really, really, really mad that LLMs are trained on all the GitHub data. And so it's kind of fascinating to me where some people would be very mad at me that I helped create GitHub and helped, LLMs train themselves on a bunch of illegal copyrighted data. But anyways, go on with your question. I find that a very interesting topic.
Yeah, but in a sense, it's allowing us to talk about this topic of AI in a way that makes it more rational. And I agree with you in what you call taste. I guess some other people would call, Brad Feld, the guy who started Techstars, would call it like quality. What is intrinsic quality about seeing something that is just bad, or what you consider bad taste, right? And has this sort of nice connection to it, which is related to how do we, in this age of building this super sharp tool that is going to basically cut through all of the life and mundanity and this banal work that we're kind of trapped in, how do we shoehorn into this sort of machine, this piece that, as you said, we as humans intrinsically possess, which is sort of this piece of wisdom, right? How do you shoehorn wisdom into a machine? And I don't think we've solved that problem yet. And it's gonna affect us in the sense that if we offlay more and more of the decision making to these machines, we expect it to be wise, but we didn't plan for this, right? It's just it knows, but it's not wise.
This is an interesting thing to think about, right? If you're working in especially in the LLM sort of AI space, because it's very, there's dirt in it, right? You asked it the same question. I give you slightly different answers, but it's going to be relatively similar answers, right? If you ask it the same thing. I think what's interesting about the phrase taste is that taste can be incredibly different for different people, right? Like if we all decide that we're going to go clubbing tonight, there's going to be 6 different places that people want to go. I want to go fucking country line dancing. None of you guys want to go country line dancing, right? That is a very specific taste that I have as an American. There's going to be, I feel like it's going to be hard to have, you can prompt it, right? You can say, here's what I like, try to come up with something that's similar to what I like. But like, any of these things are going to be so specific. Like taste is going to be very specific. It's just going to be, I think that GitHub had good taste. That is not, qualitative. Like it's not universally true. Some people probably liked Google Code much better than GitHub, right? It just kind of turned out in the numbers that wasn't more universally true. Or wisdom, right? There are, especially now, people on TikTok or whatever that you see that seem very wise, or seem very wise when you're 20 and don't seem as wise when you're 40, right? Like, or whatever, when like it just like the idea of wisdom and the idea of taste are so kind of specific. It's not about individual things, or individual like facts that you can recall. It's about point of view and personality to some degree. And so yes, I understand that you can have some prompt that says I'm looking down this road, but I want something along these lines. But I think it's very difficult to say it has wisdom, because you still have to prompt it with the type of wisdom that you want it to come up with for you, right? So it's going to be hard. I don't know if that's a good answer. I'm so sorry, but like I find this a very, very interesting like thing of how much my perspective of what's wise or what's right and wrong and stuff has changed over my lifetime, right? As I've gotten different experience and learned different things. Like what I thought was true and what I thought was right when I was younger is not the same as what I think is true and what I think is right when I'm older. And it's not because it's more right or more wrong. It's because there's just different perspectives, right? And if you have one system that's doing everything, it's very hard to say, please do it this way. So I'm curious how you think something would be wise or not in sort of this universal system.
Cool. Thank you very much. I would say one last question we have time for.
Thank you very much. What advice would you give founders starting out, and how did this response to this question change over the years?
What would the question was, what's my advice to somebody starting out as like a founder? So it's a great question, actually. I think my advice would mostly be similar to the ending of my other answer, which was to